What's up, guys? A couple days ago, somebody commented on a video about items that sell well. And they were like, well, instead of saying this, why don't you do a video saying items that don't sell well? And I think that's actually a really good idea, because that's how I think about a lot of things. Is like, does it produce a problem? Okay. Does it not produce a problem? Because if it doesn't produce a problem, that's definitely ideal, really. So let's talk about some items that one would want to avoid. And let's make a distinction here. And that distinction is that there are some things that you want to avoid when you're beginning that can be profitable later. But you don't want to dabble in it at the very beginning until you have an established base of items and you've established cash flow. So for this reason, I strongly encourage you, if you're starting and you're new as a dropshipper, you really should avoid expensive items. Ideally, you should only be posting items that you could afford to refund if you absolutely had to. So with that in mind, it's much more feasible to have $10, $20 items than to be selling $100, $200, or even $1,000 items, right? And this is something that a lot of people don't do when they start. They start off and they're like, oh, I want to get like 40 bucks profit. I'm going to sell this $300 item. You have to be really careful with expensive items, because if you do not have the cash flow, then you have to understand that you are literally a moment away from your biggest sale being deducted from your PayPal account. You can never know exactly when that will happen, so you always have to have the cash flow at any given moment to handle that, right? And normally, if you have a big enough business and you got enough things coming in, eventually you don't really have to worry about this concept anymore. But as a beginner, it's really important that you avoid these situations, because as a beginner, it's not, you may think that it's about being profitable and about making profitable sales, but when you begin, most people aren't really trying to earn money. What they're looking for is proof of concept. They don't believe that you can drop ship an item from a place and sell it for more expensive and actually sell it. Like, most people, when they hear about drop shipping, that's the first thing that they think about. They're like, that doesn't make sense. Why would somebody buy something for more expensive when they could get it cheaper somewhere else? You know? And then there's a point where, like, you realize, oh, okay, not everybody always buys the cheapest thing. Okay, you know, and you start to have all these realizations and that kind of thing. But my point is that when you start, it's more about proof of concept. So what you should do is learn to avoid certain kinds of items that are likely to knock you out of the game, right? Say that you do get one of these $300, $400 sales, you're all excited, you go get some drinks with your friends, you come back, and then 2 days later, he's like, yo, this don't fit, I don't like this, send it back. And you're like, fuck. You know, it's not an ideal situation, all right? So we've covered that. Now let's move on to something else. And that's going to be electronics. I'm not going to say categories you should avoid completely, but I am going to give you feedback about certain categories, right? So you got to be a little bit careful with electronics, just because of the kind of voltage differences when you're shipping overseas, and also that there's a lot of specifications with electronics. So it can be quite easy to think that you're selling one particular thing and you don't actually completely understand what the product is. So as a beginner, you might want to stay away from them. And I'm not saying you can't buy electronics, you can't sell them, but in general, you probably should try selling other categories of items first, okay? One of the reasons a lot of people who use Home Depot do well is because inherently a lot of the items that Home Depot sells just happen to be good, like, for drop shipping, compared to like stores like Walmart, which sell pretty much everything, right? Walmart sells a lot of like gun related stuff and rifles. Like, you don't want to drop ship that, right? That's a problem, right? You can't just sell everything that Walmart sells. Whereas when it comes to Home Depot, you kind of can. It's just there aren't as many like blatant problems with the kinds of categories that Home Depot sells. And that's just to further illustrate this point that it does kind of matter what categories of items you're picking from. You want as much variety as possible while avoiding the problematic categories, right? So you don't have to completely avoid electronics. It's not a horrible category. It's just like you're going to have some more returns. There's going to be a higher chance that things get damaged in shipping, or that there's the buyer's under the impression that it's 64 gigabytes, but it's really 32, that kind of thing. Just be wary of it. Also, the next thing to be wary of is particularly heavy items. So if you're avoiding more expensive items, you're going to inherently avoid heavier items anyway. But you will find that certain heavier items, depending on your source, can have a different shipping price. So Walmart's nice because they have a set $6 shipping price across everything, right? They didn't used to, but now that's pretty standard. Whereas some places have a almost always $6 shipping fee, but then sometimes there's a $20 fee, and sometimes it's like $90, right? Like Home Depot used to do that. I don't use Home Depot a whole lot anymore, so I'm not sure, but that very much used to be a thing with them, right? So it's important to keep weight in mind, just because it can induce more shipping costs, right? And it can also increase the shipping time. So ideally, you're as you begin, you're getting items that aren't quite yet, that aren't heavy, also aren't expensive, aren't electronics. What else? Okay, well, I mentioned this earlier, but you should absolutely avoid like sports categories, just because of knives, hunting weapon parts, like all of these things. eBay has issues with a lot of like hunting and weapon related stuff, right? So it's best to just avoid that entirely. Like, I'm not saying you can't post tents and like even like hatchets and axes and that kind of thing. The point is, make sure you know the rules. Don't just expect that things are going to be okay, and understand that when it comes to like sports as a category, there are a lot of subcategories within sports that you really should refrain from posting because you're going to get problems with eBay, okay? So sports aside, and I'm saying sports, but really I'm talking about anything related to weapons or hunting, okay? Because there's like assault rifles, for instance. You cannot even hint at the existence of assault rifle compatibility on eBay. Anything to do with assault rifles, they are not happy with. If you have an item that works for tons of things, and you just casually mention that it also works with an assault rifle, that item is now in violation, despite the fact that the item itself can be sold on eBay. You literally just can't, like, talk about assault rifles at all, or sell anything related to assault rifles. So that's really important to know, is like avoid gun sites, that kind of thing. You can sell kitchen knives, and a lot of knives in a lot of situations, but you have to be careful because you don't know where the item's going necessarily. If it is going to an overseas customer, then you can't necessarily sell a knife. There's a lot of stuff to learn, right? So what other categories should be best avoided? I guess, so there are some other things to keep in mind, and that's like chemicals. So certain states have restriction over what kinds of items can be shipped and what can be contained in shipments, right? So you'll find that like you go to place an order and it's in stock, but because it's going to California or Idaho or wherever, there's some state regulation that prohibits shipment of that particular kind of item. And this is going to happen a lot also because in its very nature, when something can't be bought in a state, that creates demand for the state. Or that creates demand for that item. So if you sell the item without knowledge that it can't ship there, it's quite likely that you will get a sale and then have to go through that scenario. So obviously, people from other states can buy those items. So these are just things to be aware of, because ultimately that doesn't matter a whole lot, because from eBay's perspective, it's viable for you to just be like, hey man, I'm sorry, your particular state, I really shouldn't ship this item to. I'm not supposed to, and I apologize about that. And in eBay's mind, that's not as bad as you just being like, I can't ship this anywhere. That's not good, right? So what else? What other products or categories have problems? Honestly, I think most of the other problems are more more supplier specific, right? So I can give you a couple examples of supplier specific problems with Walmart. And what I mean when I say supplier specific is that these aren't problems with a category so much as it is a mistake that Walmart makes over and over again, or Amazon, or whatever company you use to source your products, right? So with Walmart, they fairly frequently have typos in their listing, particularly with pack of items. So you'll find that Walmart sells a lot of items that are like a 6-pack of this barbecue sauce or a 24-pack of this soda. Pack just means it's one item multiple times sold as a single unit, right? So what you'll find is that Walmart frequently will overstate their, and I say frequently, it's not super frequent, but if you're drop shipping with Walmart, you are going to notice this, that you sell an item and your buyer's like, I only received 3. And then you look at the Walmart ad and it says it's a 6-pack. And you might think that, oh, they just forgot to send 3, which happens sometimes. But most of the time, the reality is that their ad was written wrong. And Walmart doesn't have an effective revision process for their existing listings. Like, there are some listings that I've seen that are problematic, right? That haven't been fixed in like a year. And then there are other listings that I see get fixed, and it's like, it's a bit odd. It's hard to understand like how Walmart exactly manages all of its listings and how it deals to problems. Like, what you do find is that there's a lot of 1-star items that like you can look at the 1-star reviews and just see that it is blatantly not what it says it's for. And you would think that like that is something that Walmart could very easily flag through automation. Like, all they would have to do is just have a process that adds all item IDs that have like more than one star review in a queue, and then just like compares it to see if it has any other reviews. And if it doesn't, then it just has a queue and you just fix it. Like, it would take so little work to address that problem on a large scale if that was a focus. And so that's what, like, maybe Walmart isn't at that point. Maybe it just wanted to have a bunch of listings and doesn't really care if they're working properly as much. I'm not really sure, you know, it's a lot of speculation, but that is a common problem where it'll be like, this is a 24-pack, it's actually a 12-pack. Also, there are items that are glitched on Walmart where you can't buy them. Like, you just can't. Every time you try to, when you click add to cart, it'll act like it's restricted to your state, but the reality is you can try every zip code that in every different state, and it's restricted to every single state, right? So the main difference here is that if you get the restricted to state notification basically as soon as you click like go to cart, then that could be an indication that there's a bigger problem. Whereas if you only get the can't ship to state notification once you add the address itself in and edit it, then maybe it actually is the can't ship to that state because of state restrictions, right? So what else? Well, we've gone over electronics, we've gone over categories to avoid, some kind of store-specific problems. What else do you need to avoid as a beginner dropshipper? Because really the question that this commenter asked was, are there specific kinds of items and specific categories that should be avoided? And I think that covers most of the general ones. I can't think of any more off the top of my head. Obviously there are more, but I hope that is enough for now. And if you guys want more videos like this, just ask questions. Honestly, this is I'm trying to separate myself a bit from my content, so it's likely that I'll be doing more of these kind of videos where I can just like get a question and then just answer a question that maybe isn't a video that's great for every single subscriber, but is specific to one of you watching and helps you in some way. So I encourage you to ask questions thinking that, okay, maybe Jack will answer this by making a video, right? So what kind of video would benefit you? And ask a question about it. And the best way, really, because I don't look at YouTube comments constantly, I still haven't learned to balance the effect it has on my emotions and my personal life, and I don't have enough separation, so I don't regularly check my YouTube comments. So if you want to reach me in a more effective way, then send me an email. You could message me on Facebook, but that's not going to work as well. The best way is to send me an email or to message me on Skype, or yeah, those are the two best ways, okay? But my point is that I'm going to be making more of probably these kind of videos, and also a lot more interviews, a lot more conversations with other people. And so I've set up, as you guys saw in yesterday's episode, there's now a link that you can go to and just schedule an interview with me. I literally don't even know who you are until I see that I'm scheduled to interview you. So I'm curious how this is going to go, and I think that has more long-term viability for the future of my YouTube channel. So that's a direction that I'm trying to head towards, especially because it'll expose me to so much information and give me a lot of very valuable experience, right? So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time. And again, if you have any questions, comment or send me an email. Email is definitely best. Email, I will almost certainly make a video for you. If you kinda would like that idea, but you don't want to commit all the way, then put a comment on the YouTube video, and I'll check it at some point. But if you really, really want a video about a specific subject, then email me. And you can find my email address pretty easily if you watch other videos, but it's jackdermotpitman@gmail.com. Alright guys? Cool. See you next time. Ciao.